In today's segment, we're going to talk about where my core motivation comes from for being prepared. Spoiler alert, parents, if you have children listening, we're going to discreetly talk about some bodily functions. Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out. So in today's continued intro into the preparedness series, I wanted to give a little background. One of the things that you're going to find is that people who are committed, dedicated, have passion and motivation for being prepared and being taken care of usually have a pivotal moment in their life that made it abundantly clear on a very internal level that this was important to them. Several people you'll see on the internet are family farmers. They come from farms or they moved on and they're doing the homesteading with animals, acreage, and that's the direction that they're going. But an overwhelming majority of people that are going to see this probably live in a more metropolitan environment, maybe not straight urban, but they're not going to be farming their food. And honestly, gardening is fun and it can really enhance your lifestyle, but the odds of you successfully growing all of your food for any length of time are close to zero. Believe me, I've tried. I've done pretty good and I've supplemented a lot. But just the acreage alone to grow the corn and the wheat that you're going to need for everything else makes it unlikely. Obviously, I come from a family background, Midwestern, and canning and preserving and storing up and root cellars were permanently ingrained in my family's history and heritage. I grew up in the Phoenix area, born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s and 80s. And we didn't practice a lot of that canning and preserving like that. There was no need to, and it wasn't. That would have been more expense than it would have saved anything most times. So for many of us, we can easily look at our children, and that would be motivation enough. The fear of a parent of having hungry kids or kids going without, suffering, if you will, that can be very overwhelming and powerful. Many of us have said, I don't mind being hungry or tired, but I'm not going to let that happen to my kids. But now I'm an empty nester and I'm still maintaining a respectable pantry. This is one of them. I have a couple of smaller ones. I keep beverages in one place and I keep a lot of canned and pickled items in another location. For me, I had an event in my life that made it abundantly clear that maintaining a well-stocked pantry and having this attitude of ensuring that I would have a reasonable amount of the things that I needed to continue to live comfortably should the availability of products that I'm used to be impeded. I was on track to be a pastry chef. I graduated from the American Culinary Federation's apprenticeship program as a certified working pastry chef from the Ritz-Carlton in the late 80s. And one night I was coming out of work and my 1984 Toyota four-wheel drive, love that vehicle, was not in the spot where I parked it. And in its place was a little broken glass and two pieces of wire. So my truck got stolen and I had to walk home that night. I was living about 14 miles from where I walked and I was so upset that the walk did me some real good. While I was walking home, I walked past a bike shop, College City Cyclery. And in the window they had a Moots mountain bike. Now mountain biking's common and accepted now, but back then it was unheard of and I'd never seen anything like this. It was a tank with pedals, beyond cool. Couple days went by and it dawned on me that the insurance company was refusing to pay because the lot where the vehicle was parked was a private for-profit lot and they were responsible. The private for-profit lot said they were contracted by the hotel. They were responsible. And the hotel said they take no responsibility for employees' property, that the credit union was responsible. So I had all three parties pointing at each other, and at the end of the day, I wound up paying about $7,600 on a truck that I no longer had. It doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but I'll tell you, in the late 80s, that was a ton of money. So instead of making a prompt payment, I took what little money I had and I went back to that bike shop. I couldn't afford the Moots. It was very expensive hand-built mountain bike for the time, but I could afford a Specalized stump jumper. So I bought that bicycle and I started commuting the 14 and a half miles to my pastry chef job on a mountain bike through Phoenix summer conditions. Well, after I graduated and I finished, got a lot of job offers and opportunities to go to the big resorts and a couple of one-star kitchens. And if you don't know how important having a single star is, go to That Dude Can Cook and ask him. But instead, I realized I needed to round out my life, and I wound up going to university up in northern Arizona and took my mountain bike with me. Mountain bike was growing and had this vibe like surfing was in the 60s, and I wanted to be a part of it. So instead of continuing my track as a chef, I went to college and got a bachelor's degree and became a starving college kid. My second year at college, my roommate had just left the armed forces. He was a soldier. He was a good soldier. And I want to just tell you right now, on behalf of a grateful nation, if you're a veteran, you're in active duty, you're in harm's way today, you're a member of the National Guard. Thank you. We love you and we care about you. Please take good care of yourself, especially our cooks. But my roommate, anyway, we got to talking one day and he brought up the subject of MREs. See the picture.
We referred to these as meal refused by everyone.
And I knew a thing or two about food, and I knew a thing or two about C rations and K rations and MREs. And he made me a bet for $200 that I couldn't survive on eating nothing but MREs for 14 straight days. Well, I'm a starving college kid, like I said, and $200, and I wanted to show him a thing or two. I thought that was easy money, so I took his bet. Now, those of you that know are already starting to laugh and turn colors. If you don't know, you have no idea. It wasn't until about the night of day 10 and the morning of day 11 that it dawned on me what I had done to my body. I sincerely thought I was going to die. MREs are not your friend. They're designed to keep you functioning and productive. They are not designed to be comfortable. I made it all the way through the bet, and by day 14, I ended up downing about, and Mom and Dad, if you've got kids watching this with you, we're going to talk about bodily functions, however be it, we're going to be discreet, so spoiler alert. I bought a box of laxatives and downed most of it trying to get something to start happening because nothing had happened after about day 3 of this MRE regimen. And so there I was in the dorm rooms sitting on the throne making my peace with my maker because I seriously thought this was the end of my existence. And my roommate went and got all the other guys in the hallway. I was on an athlete floor, so the guys on the basketball team thought it was hilarious to fill up their plastic trash cans with ice cold water and pour it over the stall to the bathroom. Actually, the cold water was a tremendous relief. It took about 3 or 4 days to really work that out, but it was awful. It was utterly awful. And that's when, as a cook and a human being, I learned that if I'm going to exist and prosper and flourish, that I am never going to be without good food, and I'm never going to stock my pantry with food that I believe is designed to try to kill me. Now, I received a bottle opener from a friend of mine in Regensburg, Germany. Love for Bavaria. And on the back of the bottle opener, picture of it right there, it says, "For mehr als für den Durst gebracht." Please forgive my enunciation. Roughly translated, it means it is for more than thirst why we brew. Now, if you're watching this and you have alcohol challenges, all apologies. The last thing I want to do is be in a position to trigger that. But it talks about craftsmanship to me, and it talks about thriving, not just surviving. It's for more than thirst why we brew. There's a lot of reasons. So Not only do I want to have food that's going to help me stay alive, but some of life's little luxuries in a time of crisis can make all the difference in the joy and that resiliency in keeping your heart strong, not just your body and your mind. So that's my little story about why I am such a dedicated pantry stocker and prepared person. As you can see, I took the doors off the closet here. I have insulated doors to help keep this cool and all of this out of the light. I'm going to do a close-up of just tomato products to get started. I wanted to show you one approach to this, but you can see I've got canned, ready-to-eat items. I've got essential baking items. I have dried store items that'll last indefinitely. I have buckets full of flour. I know I might get some grief for my hardcore folks that I'm using Kikkoman soy sauce and Firehouse sub buckets to store my wheat berries and some of my flours. But I've sealed them up nice and tight. I have the snap-on lids there, and I rotate them diligently. I don't expect any of this to last any longer than absolutely necessary. So we're going to go over a lot of this and talk about that, but I wanted you to know emotionally where I'm coming from. And it's my hope that you have a story like this that makes you say, yes, I understand on a core level. When people say trust your gut, the exact translation of that is trust your bowels. Funny how it ties into my MRE story. So please take a look at what you have. If you're in an apartment living paycheck to paycheck, this applies to you more than someone who's living on a farm with no mortgage and they have a root cellar and a garden the size of my entire property. You can put aside enough to get you going. Everybody talks about the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air. 3 hours exposed to extremes. 3 days without water. 3 weeks without food. 3 months without love and company and affection. I strongly recommend you look at some of the other channels with a much more mechanical and academic approach to this, and it will help you. Regardless of your faith and your spiritual beliefs, you can look at the Church of Latter-day Saints. They have some phenomenal prepping guides. I grew up in a neighborhood, most of my friends growing up were Mormon, and I learned a lot from rotating and prepping from them. As well, you can learn a lot from any organization, faith-based organization. I guarantee you that the folks in your neighborhood want you to be well taken care of. So, something to think about. We're going to pan out in a second with a brief overview of some tomato products, and then we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts. When you go to the next video in this series, have a pen and paper ready and or do some screenshots on your phone. I want to go over the specifics of what you like to eat, what's available in your area, how long you think you might be in a position where you can't go get resupplied, and what you have to cook with. I love tomatoes. So here is a brief overview of some of the tomato products that I have available. You'll note immediately there's no tomato paste in here. My absolute preference would be for tomato powder. This is Anginson Farms. This is a phenomenal product. One major drawback though, look at the size of this can. I'm an empty nester right now. There is a hesitancy to open this any sooner than I absolutely need it. This is the absolute long term. Then I have sun-dried tomatoes from Turkey, and 5-pound bag. Again, I'm running into the same deal if I open this bag up. It'll be my preference at that point that this would get rotated to the freezer and it would get processed as much as possible. But I love the texture and the approach of a sun-dried tomato. It does a lot of functions that other tomatoes just can't and won't do, and it's a great preservation method. And then I go to prepared and finished pasta sauces already. Now, I generally tend to prefer the more basic, I don't want a bunch of additive ingredients, I just want a basic tomato sauce. I will finish it however I can. For example, lobster mushrooms grow up here, and if I'm able to harvest a bunch, then I can make a mushroom marinara. Phenomenal stuff. This has a medium size best by date, obviously. One of the things that I love and are the petite diced tomatoes. because you can go straight into and make a doomsday salsa with petite diced tomatoes, dehydrated onion flakes, canned jalapenos, and a little bit of your seasoning. The onions will soak up the juice from the tomato and make a phenomenal, fully shelf-stable salsa that you can eat quickly. But in my book, where my heart lies more than anywhere, are the San Marzano organics. Now, I prefer to eat a highly pure diet of mostly whole type foods. If you can't pronounce it, odds are I don't want to be eating it. And these San Marzanos are phenomenal. It's a whole peeled tomato, so you can go any direction with this. And if I had nothing else in my pantry, this is what I would start with. Interestingly enough, though, the best by date on this, I don't know if you can read that, says 8/22. So their best by date passed a month ago. Doesn't mean they're expired and unusable. Sound good like they're in there and there's no dents on the can. But these are definitely going to rotate to the front of my pantry and will get used quickly. We will go over several categories of foods that are absolutely essential to have. Oats, rice, wheat, and especially in the form of pasta, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, and all of those key building blocks. Start with a handful of simples and you can grow your way up. Grazie mille per tutti.
So I took that mountain bike up to university and I promptly broke it in half on the trails up there. I replaced it with a Keith Bontrager, phenomenal steel mountain bike. You will have noticed in my pantry that I had some processed foods, very limited, not much, but sometimes you get a craving for the junk food. Typically I try to avoid highly refined flour, highly refined sweeteners, highly refined salts, and food coloring. Stick with the fundamentals and you can't go wrong. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next episode.